player Will.
Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. This is the Shurecca character review. Brand new unit added to Global this week, and today's character review, pretty standard things here. The character overview, we'll look at her stats, we'll look at the report card, a should you pull analysis, some general thoughts about the character, the job overview, the TMR, whether or not she's worth it for that item alone, the job-based vision card eligibility, some general optimization and equipment pieces, some of my favorite teams, and then the Truststones. And so without further ado, Shurecca, the brand new wind unit added to the game here. They've given her the unique main job of Deep Sight Mage with Kotodama Wielder and Blade Soul as those sub-jobs. She does equip Stabs as part of the Staff Black Mage group, also equips Cloths, Hats, and Accessories with a Move 3 Jump of 1 as a 100 cost unit, and no doubt a 97 Faith recommendation as well. Now on her main job, the max range she can hit you from is 5 squares away. She does have 1 AoE ability and 3 single target scaling abilities, which is her bread and butter. She's very much a unit attack oriented character. From a resistance perspective, really only the strike damage to look out for here at the minus 10%. And from an ailment perspective, they gave her 50% to curse. This is absolutely enormous in that Sephiroth matchup, which we'll talk about and obviously see throughout the rest of the presentation. But she's also 50% to silence, which obviously helps very much against Ashen King Mont, who she already has the edge anyway, being a wind unit versus an earth unit. And so those are two major ways that you could potentially shut her down, and she already has the innate 50% resistance to both of those, so it's a great starting spot for her in that regard. Now her mastery ability, they gave her a slew of different things here: debuff weakening 20, crit rate of 10, 10 unit resistance, but more than anything, they gave her an extra 15% to apply immobilize, which is on one of her main abilities here if she has her honeycomb barrier up, which she likely will. So we'll walk through that more in a little bit, but she also has 15 AoE resistance. In addition to that unit resistance, 30% innate reaction block rate, and 15 crit evasion as well. They really did a good job scattering a lot of different stats here throughout the 140 and the Dream ability. Now, just getting a peek at the stats overall, she does skew on the higher side for HP, particularly as a mage, where mages obviously tend to skew a little bit lower than the physical bruiser or brawler physical damage DPS units. Her magic is still top tier. She is in the second category down, but only 2 magic points off of where my threshold ends. So for all intents and purposes, very high base magic. Also, very much above average dexterity here. It's not off the charts, but certainly in a very good starting spot. And the same thing can be said for the luck stat, coming in at the 196. All these stats check out with what we're looking for in these 4th anniversary units. And the total stat analysis, when you put in the board nodes, the mastery, and dream abilities, really no significant shifts here. She does take a slight step back in her total luck and total dexterity, but they're still at very good levels. They were very generous with the 13 agility points as well, and they gave her a little bit extra HP to bulk her up on the board notes as well. She's among one of the highest you can get for innate HP from a DPS perspective. Now, for the agility, also very fast, particularly because she does have a passive you will quite often, and most often, have equipped. It is a 12% agility passive that does put her about that 89 mark, which is right there for how fast the DPS unit's going to get in the game currently. The other stats here, the innate critical hit rate is above average. It's not off the charts, but certainly at a very good starting spot. Her crit avoidance rate also very high because of the luck stat, in addition to the 15% crit evade that they decided to give her on the 140. Innate accuracy is also in a pretty good spot. Innately speaking, it's definitely above average. She does have a 25% passive you will have on almost all the time, and so she does end up at this kind of bottom gradient of like very accurate units, and so I would consider her a very accurate unit. She also does end up where most units nowadays end up, at that 130% evasion rate on this gradient. I wouldn't call her an evade unit, but she's certainly right there with some of the others for how she benefits from luck scaling equips. Now for the report card overall, a lot of A's, a lot of B's, and the big one at the bottom, the S tier. This is, in my opinion, a meta-defining unit. There's a lot to like from the effective HP and the survivability in terms of where her HP stat is, what she has for the AoE and unit res, the 7500 HP physical barrier. She's got bravery down 15 on hit, which does have some ramifications for some small physical damage reductions on enemies. She's got a honeycomb barrier. She does have some healing capabilities. The big thing too, though, for the survivability is the ability to seal enemy buff removal on hit. Only Volke in the game has this at the moment, which allows her to retain her and her teammates buffs, which is a form of survivability, which is very, very good. Her damage is also an A. The penetrations aren't off the charts good, but they're certainly right where they need to be. She's got enough unit res pen in her kit as well, which certainly helps her do the damage she wants to do. The vision card support is there. She does have a magic barrier break on the limit break. Everything there that you want from a damage dealer. The agility is also obviously very good. The accuracy is very good. The evasion is there. The movement is pretty average, but she does have a buff for a move one, jump one on a sub job, which I don't think you're going to use quite frequently, but it's there. The auto ease of use I also think is an A. Really straightforward AI, really straightforward damage, a very self-contained kit. The game disruption for me is an A+. She's an exceptional Staff Black Mage Edition, has a ton of overlap with Katana and the other popular jobs with a bunch of damage and utility. The passives, I also made a small edit here a second ago, are an A. I do think she has two excellent passives, although I think you're likely limited to just the two of them. The counter ability is fine, the overall jobbing kit obviously is great, and the final grade, after all of this, is definitely an S. She is a meta-defining unit that can play with the best. Now for the general thoughts, the penetrations are well enough. You get 40 magic and 40 spirit pen on her two different job passives. You do have 20 additional spirit pen on her unique weapon and 30 unit res pen on her main attack, which is absolutely part of that damage consideration. She does have a typeless 38% magic imperil as well to kind of round out how she wants to do her damage. She's a little lacking from the AoE damage perspective, but it's really not that bad. We've seen with Ashen King Mott that sometimes can be a little bit limiting where, yeah, there's three enemies kind of near each other, but you can only hit two. Sometimes that stinks, but on the other hand, she's actually superior to him in that regard because her select two abilities are a height range of two different tiles. Most of these select two units are height 1, so she's got some extra versatility there on who she can hit. It's very important and an enormous upgrade, quite frankly, on how she does her damage. There's also a huge upside of the Dispel AP and Dispel Haste on her follow-up attack. That's one of the best things about her, in addition to the ability to seal enemy dispel capabilities. The bones of her stats are definitely there, but I do think you should emphasize some crit rate and some accuracy somewhere in your build. She does not have a guaranteed hit on the main job, and the crit rate, although above average, you don't want to leave it there. Her follow-up attack damage really, really ramps up quickly if you can land those critical hits, so making sure she does have a decent amount there is worth the investment. Now, there's no re-raise or courage in the kit, so it does help to have some external sustain, although it does have some like self-healing capabilities there. Having that support really does allow her to do the job she wants to, and Lucille obviously can pass on re-raise and re-raise seal, so that is a very popular synergy between the two of them. There are a couple things missing though. There's no AoE wide resistance anywhere in her kit, or any chain resistance anywhere either, but the honeycomb barrier that she does have does affect the damage calc still. That I think it's not the end of the world that you're missing these two. I've already mentioned the seal enemy buff removal is absolutely enormous for a game changer. And Staff Black Mage is quite frankly one of the best rainbow classes in the game that we'll see when we get to the job-based vision card slide. And so, should you pull? Honestly, kind of debatable. I think you can likely pass, quite frankly. If you have Summer Resnick, you probably can pass, because I think Summer Resnick does offer enough versatility in countering different kinds of metas that I think you can probably get by with her and what you might already have with Sephiroth and Gilgamesh and other great sword-oriented units. This is a unit you will want to prioritize off-banner, though, which you certainly don't want to pass altogether. It's really just an economics question at the moment, because to me, the Holovision Garuda coming next week is a huge must-get for many players for what the Esper brings, in addition to what the Vision card brings. They're both top tier. You also want to wait and see on this new Trials of Mana collaboration in JP, whether or not there's some huge fallout with Shurecca, so you have a little time to decide whether or not you want to pull her or not. For new players, I think she's a pretty solid pickup if you went the Young Helena route, where Young Helena is a very good Staff Black Mage unit as well, and so it's a natural synergy to kind of put them together as a newer account overall. But I think it's pretty safe for some people to pass if you're pretty stretched thin on Visior at the moment. But there's no doubt you're going to get an immense amount of value for at least a good chunk of time from this unit. Now, we're going to go briefly through the job here. The passive abilities, I think you're kind of limited to these two, where this top one is excellent. It's the magic resistance penetration, and the accuracy. And the bottom one here is the Spirit Pen, the agility, and the crit rate. You got 6 attributes here that are right down the middle of what she wants. I see no reason why you would ever switch off either of those, quite frankly. The counter ability here is not bad. It is a preemptive counter at a 70% chance proc rate, but it is limited to slash and strike-oriented damage. But certainly we've seen how impactful this can be in very clutch moments in the fight. From the main job buffs, there is a lot here, but I've already covered most of it. It's the 7500 HP physical barrier. She does give to teammates 20% increased damage to both physical and magic. She also gives herself the follow-up attack and the seal enemy dispel capability here. That follow-up attack does dispel AP restore and haste. Both of those are very debilitating to a variety of meta units at the moment where their second buff is an AP restore. The fact that she can get rid of that for free is pretty awesome. And then her self buff after that is an additional decreased bravery on hit. It's the honeycomb barrier of 10% resistance the further away you are. So it starts at 2 squares away, ends and taps out at its maximum at 5 squares away. And you will absorb 50% of the damage done so long as that honeycomb barrier is active. And that honeycomb barrier is very smartly conceived because we'll skip ahead to her third ability here. This is that 35% chance to inflict immobilize, which will actually be 50% chance because of her 140 ability. When you can immobilize enemies at a certain range away, that's going to amplify the potency of her honeycomb barrier that the enemies aren't going to be able to come closer and do more damage because of it. So this third ability is absolutely awesome that it's also the unit res penetration of 30% for self, as well as dispel re-raise with that extra hit chance. The other abilities here are certainly also valuable in their own way, that they all do something a little bit different, although dual hunt is slightly repetitive, but it is a very nice low AP finishing ability for the end of the fight when enemies get rather low, because it does have some HP restore when you do kill an enemy. None of these have a cast time, very nice to see. And there is one that is non-reflectable, that's that life snatcher, but the rest of them are, which is why young Helena actually does have some good counterplay against her, that the limit break, Shurecca likely will come close to killing herself if she hits a reflectability back onto herself. Now, the limit break here, absolutely awesome. It's the same 5 square range as the main job with the same range height as well. And this one is an increased modifier of 240%, but it also breaks magic barriers and it dispels the magic portion of the honeycomb barriers. This is the first unit in the game that can do something like that from the honeycomb perspective. This is an excellent limit break, obviously only one-time use, so it's good for just one fight, but this is definitely a great way for her to enable doing the damage that she wants to do. Now, for the sub-job here, Deep Sight Mage, it's got 2 different abilities here. One is offensive as a smaller AoE. The other is a curative or support ability here. It is a double hit on this first one here, the double jeer. Both of these do have cast times though. And so far you've not seen any cast time reduction within her kit. So there are some questions whether or not this is an optimal way to play with her, but a chance to inflict slow on a 97 faith unit is certainly nice here on this top ability. And the healing one certainly is nice too for second Guild War fights, or potentially those mid-fight battles where there's no enemies in range yet, and she's taking some damage and wants to heal herself. That's certainly awesome for healing herself and an ally. Just some cast time breakpoints. If you do use a Truststone passive of 200, that offensive ability will go from 3 ticks to 2 ticks. The curative ability will not move whatsoever though, so it's debatable whether you even want that Truststone passive. It's really subjective to whether or not you have this sub-job on or not. Now, the Kodama wielder, there are some things that I do like here. I do like this buff of the anti-magic wall. I don't think she's likely to use it because third buffs inherently are a little bit risky because they're dependent upon the range of the map overall, but there's no doubt this is a very good type of barrier depending on the matchup. I really just like this more for the unavoidable pain of making sure you have a 100% hit chance. You just never know when this is going to come in clutch to be able to hit someone, but I do like the move and jump buff, but I don't love this sub job. It's really just to have that 100% hit chance should you need it. The blade soul though, this sub job I do appreciate. Although it's slash type damage, I do like that there's another form of magic barrier break here. I would be hesitant to equip this though because she's got no slash res pen innately, and slash resistance is very high in the game because of power creep, so I think the odds of the AI prioritizing this are relatively low. But if you've already used your limit break in the first fight and you're on a second fight in a guild war and still need access to a magic barrier break, this one is okay, but even the range here is not ideal. So this sub job, it's fair. I honestly think I'm comfortable with the Deep Sight Mage, to be honest, because I just like the optionality here of the extra AoE attack, the slow effect, the utility of the heal. I think there's some good things here. Now, for the TMR review, I actually think this is a pretty bad TMR. Stat-wise, it's fine. I don't love that it's a hat, though. Obviously, it makes it a little more difficult because you can only equip one hat, whereas you can always equip two accessories alternatively. The ability itself is fine, but it does repeat as a buff, and Shell and 20 unit res, although for 4 turns, I don't think is an enormous game changer given that Gilgamesh can dispel the shell pretty easily, and Sephiroth on hit can dispel the unit res pretty easily. It's fine, but I don't love this TMR. Now, for the job-based vision cards, as I mentioned earlier, the Staff Black Mage is probably the best rainbow job in the game. It's right there with Katana, in my opinion, as one of the best. And I think you have 5 different classes that, like, right down the middle go great together. Axe, Book, Greatsword, Katana, and Bow. Bow's gotten a lot of love as of late. In addition to the Book class, in terms of how they've kind of melded these two, there's a lot there, and there's even bones for the Sword Red Mage, the Sword Warrior, and the Sword Knight. It's not perfect, but there's enough there that when you get an S-ranked character like this, it doesn't take much vision card support to really still let them function optimally. So you have loads of options here, and the attribute column, which I fill in a couple things here. I either fill in physical or magic AoE wide res, regular AoE res, unit res, or agility. Those 5 things are those like primary slot vision card stuff you want to hunt for. Staff Black Mage is like down the middle gotten what? 10 of these in a row. Absolutely awesome, the vision cards they've put out for this class, and Shurecca obviously benefits immensely from that. Now, for the unique equipment and the other general optimization, this is a wind-oriented spear, so it's not just for her, but for her in particular, it is 8% magic damage reduction, the crit rate of 15, the spear pen of 20. Now, I do like the crit rate build of this, quite frankly. As I mentioned, that's a stat that you just want to kind of build up. The overall difference in the magic stat itself isn't really enormous, but that crit rate does have some very tangible battle effects on her follow-up attack, whether or not you crit hit or not. Now, for the other general optimization, I think the Wizard Rod is always one of the best options because of the CT up. So it's got the damage limit up on it. Sage Staff +6 is probably the most niche of these, but it does come with free cast time reduction on it, as well as some accuracy. So if you're trying to, min-max your stats a little bit of a different way and organize your Truststone passives a certain way, I would entertain it, but I do think Soul Rest is likely the best of them, particularly because the Spear Penetration comes in very handy on the follow-up attacks. Now, for the other equipments, pretty standard things here. I think the Survival Vest, the Alex Ring, Balo's Cell Phone, the Marshmallow Mini, and the Pod Accessories. You can't go wrong with any of these, quite frankly. And the Espers, I do think the incoming Garuda Esper is the best in slot 4, but I think Bahamut is likely the close second. Dark Siren, I like it as a general one, but we've seen it fall a little bit by the wayside, but because there is magic resistance on it, I do think it has a place here. The Shinryu Esper, also for that accuracy and the magic attack and the other things it offers. And Typhon is kind of like a budget Wind Esper because it does have some crit rate and crit damage nodes on, in addition to some magic percent and some accuracy. So it's a little bit slower, but it does have all the nodes you would look for her. So honorable mention. And the TMRs, I think just go for an agility-oriented TMR and call it a day. I think it's risky to try to fit in a third buff when her main 2 buffs, you absolutely want to use both of them in your fight. Now for the Truststones, left side, you certainly have some options. I think HP is always a good option. Defense and Spirit certainly is too for the extra healing power that it adds. The luck is debatable. It's really a question of hit rates at that point. So honorable mention, but I think it's really just a matter of how evade heavy your enemies are. I see no problem stacking 4 status effects here on the left side. And the right side, sorry, quick edit here. I think these 6 on the right are pretty well rounded considering you're using her Soul Rest staff that we were just going over, where she does not need the crit rate, does not need the Spirit Penetration because they're already on the equipment. But I think going for the extra modifiers here are great. The magic 20%, obviously the healing power 10 to help her damage absorption, absolutely necessary. The reaction block of 20 gets her to 50% innately, which I do think is very important. And the dexterity of 15% is absolutely a great value add for the extra crit hit rate, in addition to the fact that the little bit of dexterity also feeds into her damage calculations. Now, depending on whether or not you're using the Wizard Rod or the Sage Staff, then you have to consider, do you want the Spirit Pen or the cast time reduction or the crit rate of 10? I think you can slot these in as need be, but it's really all weapon oriented, obviously. Some of my favorite teams, I think two of my favorite include Summer Resnick, where Summer Resnick is a great Swiss Army knife for countering the meta in a variety of ways, or at least giving you a better chance to. I think this first iteration with Sephiroth is likely the best just because Staff Black Mage and Katana have some of the best overlaps so far, and Resnick just allows them to do their job and do a bunch of damage. Now, the second one here, I do think the Gilgamesh option is also viable. It just does something a little bit differently than the Sephiroth team does. And these bottom two are more of the other variations of support-oriented duos, where if you wanted to go Sephiroth with Lucille, that's more of like a buff hyper damage team, and Lucille obviously can give the re-raise to Shurecca as well. But in JP, we've seen some sneaky creative teams using Lemure, who's actually a Staff Black Mage unit as well, so benefiting from the synergy there. And the best strategy I think this likely taps into is this like quicken-oriented team that really just allows you to repeat your turns and onslaught them with a certain amount of damage that they just can't recover from. I use the term Bushido here, which is a fun term coined by Quistis, the former leader of VIP, where the concept of this team is really just to ensure that you can get your 3 stars and call it a day. It's proven to be somewhat effective, although I don't think it's OP, but I think it's a fun honorable mention to see an old school unit put here purely for the sake of the time mage shenanigans. Now, I do think there's some upside with the Dario unit as well, depending on how far we swing into a magic oriented meta. This obviously has some downsides versus heavy ice or Gilgamesh teams, but this is certainly a synergy that exists and has been used on the JP side. I also think a mono Staff Black Mage team here with Oldoa also is feasible. And to be fair, you could put Dario in this team too instead of Oldoa. The real guts of this team, though, is the Helena Limit Break that has the Reflect on it, though, where this is really a team curated to go against other Magic teams to ensure that her Reflect can basically kill the enemy Magic users on their own attacks. And then finally, a little sneak peek to the Trials of Mana collab. I do think Duran is a great synergistic option to her, where the enemy to seal enemy buff removal really helps him with his aura. Obviously, they're both wind units, so there's some great overlap there. And Sword Warrior, as mentioned, is kind of getting into that zone of crossover with the Staff Black Mage teams. The third unit, though, I think is very dicey. I think this makes it more of a theory craft at this point, where I think it's very risky to go triple wind units. And honestly, I don't think there's a strong fire unit in there to go as a third unit, given the Sword Warrior and Staff Black Mage overlap. This is kind of like a throwback to when Sorrow from the Dragon Quest collab came out, and he with Flagbearer Glaciella and Sadali were a great fire-wind combo that were able to go against a handful of ice teams as well as everyone else, but I don't know if there's a fire unit that I love, but remains to be seen. And that's the Shurecca review altogether. Again, an absolutely exceptional unit, very self-contained, a great diversion from the physical and slash-oriented meta we've become accustomed to seeing over the past couple months. She does appear to have a relatively decent shelf life here, that even with Summer Resnick being introduced into the fold, Shurecca still seems to be one of the most viable units to play at the top end of the game. So no doubt you'll get value out of her if you pull her. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, everybody. Per usual, comments, critiques, criticisms, everything in the comment section below. Appreciate you watching, and I'll talk to you all later.